Part 1. Every Sunday, my daughter-in-law insisted I sit at the head of the table. For almost 2 years, I thought it meant she had finally accepted me. I thought maybe all those cold little years between us were beginning to thaw. Maybe she had grown tired of treating me like an old piece of furniture that came with my son's life. Maybe, after all that time, she had looked at me and decided I was still family. Then, one rainy Sunday evening in May, a young waitress at Miller's Creek Grill touched my arm near the restroom hallway and whispered, "Ma M. Do you know over 80,000 people are watching you right now?" I looked at her, confused. She held out her phone. On the screen was my face. My hands, my plate, my voice. And above the video, in bright white letters, was the caption, "Dinner with my impossible mother-in-law again." Pray for me. The comments were moving so fast I could barely read them. "She looks mean. Classic bitter old lady, poor daughter-in-law. Why do they always chew like that?" For a moment, I could not breathe. Not because strangers were laughing at me, but because I recognized the camera angle. It came from the floral centerpiece my daughter-in-law brought to dinner every week. I had admired those flowers. I had even thanked her for them. My name is Evelyn Carter. I am 69 years old. A retired high school librarian from Maple Falls, Ohio. A town small enough that people still notice when you change churches, switch grocery stores, or stop putting wreaths on your porch at Christmas. I had one son, Matthew. And for most of my life, Matthew was the safest place in my heart. When his father, George, died 12 years ago, Matthew was the one who stood beside me at the cemetery. Holding my elbow so gently, I almost broke from the kindness of it. He was 34 then, still boyish in the face, still calling me mama when he forgot to sound grown. "You won TB alone," he told me that day. I promise I believed him. A mother always believes the version of her child that once needed her. 3 years later, he married Lauren. Lauren was beautiful in the way magazine kitchens are beautiful, bright, polished, and impossible to touch without leaving fingerprints. She had honey blonde hair, perfect teeth, and the kind of smile people trusted before she ever earned it. At first, I tried to love her. I baked her apple cinnamon bread when she moved into Matthew's townhouse. I gave her George's mother's pearl earrings for the wedding. I stood in the church basement after the reception, wrapping leftover cake in foil while her bridesmaids posted photos online. Lauren hugged me that night and said, "I am so lucky to have you." But her arms were loose around my shoulders. Even then, some part of me knew. Over the years, Lauren became what people nowadays call a lifestyle creator. At least that was what Matthew called it. "She makes videos, Mom," he said once, as if explaining electricity to a child. "Home stuff, family stuff, recipes, people love her." And they did. Online, Lauren was warm, funny, patient, and endlessly exhausted by family life. Her videos showed Sunday casseroles, spotless countertops, linen napkins, soft music, and little captions about grace. People adored her. They called her relatable. They called her an angel. They called her the daughter-in-law every family needed. I only saw the camera. At first it was harmless. A phone propped near the stove while she stirred soup. A quick clip of the dining table before we sat down. A smiling pan across the room while Matthew carved the roast. "Just memories," she would say. So I tried not to be old-fashioned about it. Every generation has its habits. Mine saved recipes in tin boxes. Hers saved everything in public. Then the Sunday dinners became more formal. Lauren started insisting we eat at 6 sharp. She bought matching napkins. She placed candles on the table, even in July. She asked me to wear something cheerful because darker colors looked heavy on camera. On camera. I should have noticed that phrase. But loneliness makes you grateful for scraps. After George died, Sundays had been the worst. That was the day silence settled deepest in the house. No football from the living room. No clatter of George pretending he knew how to cook breakfast. No low whistle from the garage while he sharpened tools he barely used. So when Lauren began inviting me every week I went. I brought pies, I brought flowers, I brought myself. And each week, she sat me at the head of the table. Evelyn deserves the place of honor, she would say, smiling sweetly toward the centerpiece. I thought she meant it. Matthew usually sat to my right, tired from work, distracted by his phone, but kind enough when he remembered to look up. Lauren sat across from me, asking little questions in a voice too bright to be natural. Evelyn, do you always put that much salt on your potatoes? Evelyn, did people really eat that way back then? Evelyn, what was it like raising children before everyone knew better? The first few times, I laughed politely. Then, I began answering carefully. Then I stopped answering much at all. I told myself she was nervous, that she wanted content. That young women today lived under pressure, I could not understand. But sometimes, while clearing plates, I would hear Matthew and Lauren laughing in the kitchen. Their voices would drop when I entered. Once, my grandson Noah, who was 13 then, looked at me strangely from across the table. Grandma, he asked, why do people online call you Ice Queen Evelyn? Lauren dropped a fork. Matthew frowned. Noah, what? He said. It's in Mom's comments. Lauren laughed too quickly. Oh, honey, people online say silly things. They don't mean anything. I looked at my plate. The roast had gone cold. That night, I drove home under a gray sky, past wet mailboxes and empty yards, telling myself not to be dramatic. At my age, a woman learns how easily pain can disguise itself as sensitivity. People dismiss you with one word: difficult, bitter, lonely, old, so I swallowed the hurt. I kept going because my son was there. Because my grandson was there. Because every Sunday, for 90 minutes, I got to pretend I still belonged to a family. I did not know that every awkward pause, every confused expression, every moment I wiped sauce from my chin or asked someone to repeat a sentence had been clipped, captioned, and served to strangers as entertainment. I did not know that Lauren had built an audience by turning me into a villain. I did not know that people in grocery stores were not staring because they recognized me from church. They were staring because they had already laughed at me. And I did not know that the Sunday I found out would begin like any other. With me standing in my kitchen, wrapping a lemon pound cake in wax paper, smoothing the ribbon around the box, and whispering to George's photograph on the shelf, maybe tonight will be better. By 8 o'clock that evening, I would be sitting in a restaurant booth, watching myself be humiliated in real time. And by midnight, I would finally understand that my daughter-in-law had not been inviting me to dinner. She had been feeding me to the internet. Part 2, the woman on the screen, the waitress, couldn't have been older than 22. She wore a faded denim apron, her dark hair tied into a loose ponytail that had begun slipping from the rush of the dinner crowd. She looked terrified, as though telling me the truth might cost her job. I'm so sorry, she whispered again. I didn't think you knew. For a second, I simply stared at the phone in her trembling hands. The live stream continued. Hearts floated endlessly across the screen. Thousands of comments poured in every minute, some laughed. Some mocked the way I held my fork. Others joked about the wrinkles on my hands. One comment caught my eye. She looks exactly like my nightmare mother-in-law. More than 6,000 people had liked it. I looked up toward our booth. Lauren was laughing, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. The kind of laugh that sounded completely natural to anyone sitting nearby. Matthew was cutting another piece of steak. Noah was scrolling through his phone. Neither of them seemed aware that 80,000 strangers were watching us eat dinner, or perhaps only one of them wasn't aware. The waitress swallowed hard. I follow her account, she said quietly. Everyone at the restaurant knows who she is. My stomach tightened. Her account? She nodded. Lauren Hartwell Living. The name meant nothing to me. I'd heard Matthew mention sponsorships once or twice. Free cookware, kitchen appliances, fancy coffee machines. I never paid attention. The internet belonged to younger people. Or at least, that's what I had always believed. The waitress hesitated before speaking again. She comes here almost every Sunday. Yes, and She looked over her shoulder before lowering her voice even more. She always requests the same booth. I frowned. What difference does that make? She pointed toward the flower arrangement sitting in the center of our table. The camera gets the perfect angle from there. My eyes drifted toward the vase. White peonies, fresh eucalyptus. A small ceramic pitcher painted blue. It looked harmless, beautiful even. I remembered complimenting it just 20 minutes earlier. Lauren had smiled proudly. I made it myself. Now I noticed something I had completely missed. A tiny black circle hidden beneath the leaves. No larger than the head of a nail, a camera. My chest felt suddenly hollow, not angry, not yet, just empty. Like someone had quietly removed the floor beneath me without making a sound. I think. I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. I think I need to sit down. The waitress reached toward my elbow. Are you okay? I smiled automatically. Old habits die slowly. I'm fine, sweetheart. It was a lie. She knew it, I knew it. But some women spend an entire lifetime learning how to suffer without making other people uncomfortable. I walked back toward the booth. Lauren looked up immediately. There you are, she said brightly. We were wondering where you disappeared to. She said it with such effortless warmth that, for one dangerous second, I questioned everything I had just seen. Maybe there was some misunderstanding. Maybe someone else had recorded us. Maybe then I saw her phone. It wasn't lying on the table anymore. It was standing upright inside her handbag, the zipper left halfway open. The lens faced directly toward me. She had never stopped filming. I looked around the restaurant. A young couple near the window glanced at me, then quickly looked away. A man at the bar nudged his friend. Both of them smiled, not kindly, knowingly. Recognition spread through the room like invisible smoke. How many of these people already knew my face? How many had laughed at me before I ever walked through the front door? I slowly lowered myself into my chair. Lauren reached across the table. Evelyn, are you feeling all right? You look pale. The concern in her voice was flawless. If I hadn't seen the live stream, I would have believed every word. I'm just tired. You work too hard in that garden, she said. Matthew nodded absent-mindedly. I've told you that, Mom. He never looked up, his phone buzzed, he answered a text. The conversation moved on. The waitress passed by once more. Our eyes met for only a second. She looked devastated. As though she wished she had never shown me the truth. Dinner ended 15 minutes later. Lauren insisted on taking a family selfie. She held the phone high. Everyone smiled. Matthew smiled. Noah forced one. I managed something that probably resembled exhaustion more than happiness. Flash, another memory manufactured. Another version of our family prepared for strangers. Outside, rain had begun falling harder. Lauren hugged me before I walked to my car. Same time next Sunday. Her perfume smelled of vanilla and orange blossoms. The scent lingered after she stepped away. I searched her face, perfect makeup, perfect smile, perfect concern, nothing cracked, nothing slipped. If she felt guilt, she had buried it beneath layers of performance so deep that even she might have forgotten where it lived. I'll let you know, I answered. She blinked. It was only a fraction of a second, barely noticeable. But it was the first time in years I had given her an answer she wasn't expecting. Matthew kissed my forehead. Drive safe, Mom. I always do. The drive home usually took 22 minutes. That night it felt endless. Every traffic light became another opportunity to remember something I had ignored. Lauren constantly asking me to repeat stories. Lauren encouraging me to taste something before everyone else. Lauren saying, "Oh, Evelyn, tell everyone about the time you accidentally called your principal dad." People laughed, I laughed too, but now. I wondered, had those moments ever been for the family? Or had they always been for the audience? When I reached home, I didn't turn on any lights. I sat in George's old recliner and listened to the rain tapping softly against the windows. The silence felt different now, not lonely, exposed. My house had always been the one place where I knew exactly who I was. Tonight, I wasn't sure the world knew me at all. Curiosity finally defeated fear. I opened my laptop. It took me nearly 10 minutes to remember my password. Then I typed 4 words into the search bar: Lauren Hartwell living. Thousands of videos appeared instantly. Bright thumbnails, warm kitchens, holiday dinners, family traditions. Then, there I was. My face filled the screen, video after video, week after week, month after month. One title read, "Things my mother-in-law says that drive me crazy." Another, "Trying not to lose my patience with Evelyn." Then another, and another. There were hundreds, no, not hundreds. Over 400 videos, nearly 2 years of my life, edited, captioned, packaged, sold as entertainment. I clicked the oldest one. The date made my hands begin to shake. It was filmed the very first Sunday Lauren had ever invited me to dinner after telling me, "We really want you to feel included." I suddenly realized something that hurt even more than the comments. She hadn't started inviting me because she had accepted me. She had started inviting me because she had found her most profitable character, and that character was me. Part 3, the comments knew my name. Before I didn't sleep that night. Not because I kept replaying the videos, but because I kept replaying my own memories. Memory is a strange thing. It doesn't rewrite itself all at once. It waits until the truth arrives, then quietly rearranges every room in your mind. At 2:30 in the morning, I was still sitting in George's old recliner, with my laptop glowing against the darkness. The first video had seemed harmless enough. Lauren had titled it "Sunday Dinner with Family." Soft piano music, golden lighting, a perfectly roasted chicken. She smiled into the camera and whispered, "Nothing means more than family." Then the video cut to me, not the whole conversation. Just a 4-second clip. Lauren asked whether I liked the mashed potatoes. I answered they're a little salty. That was all, except it wasn't. She had edited out the sentence that came immediately afterward. "But the roast is wonderful, sweetheart. You outdid yourself." Instead, the video jumped to Lauren, lowering her eyes dramatically, before adding text across the screen. "You just can't make everyone happy." The comments flooded in, "She's impossible." "My mother-in-law is exactly like this." "I would have kicked her out years ago." One woman wrote, "Older people think criticizing everything makes them wise." That comment alone had nearly 18,000 likes. I clicked another video. This time I laughed at something, only. The laugh wasn't attached to the right moment. Lauren had cut together 3 different conversations. She made it appear as though I laughed while Noah was talking about failing a math test. In reality, I had been laughing because Matthew accidentally dropped an entire dinner roll into his iced tea. The room had erupted. Even Lauren laughed, but that part never made it online. Truth was too ordinary. Cruelty performed better. I kept watching, clip after clip. Week after week. Each one shaved away another piece of reality, until the woman on the screen barely resembled me. By sunrise, I understood something that chilled me more than the comments ever could. Lauren wasn't documenting my life, she was writing a character. And every Sunday, I unknowingly auditioned for the role. I closed the laptop and walked into the kitchen. George always said difficult mornings deserved proper coffee. The familiar ritual steadied my hands: grind the beans, heat the kettle, pour slowly. Outside, Maple Falls was waking up. Mr. Donnelly walked his golden retriever past my mailbox. Mrs. Price waved while collecting her newspaper. Everything looked exactly the same, only I wasn't. For the first time in years, I wondered how many people recognized me before I recognized them. Had the cashier at Miller's grocery smiled because she was kind? Or because she knew Ice Queen Evelyn? Had the teenagers whispering outside the pharmacy actually been talking about me? The questions multiplied faster than the answers. Around 10 that morning, my phone rang. Lauren. I stared at her name until it stopped ringing. A minute later, another call, then a cheerful text. "Hope you're resting. Last night was wonderful. Everyone loved having you there. Everyone, such a simple word. It no longer meant family. It meant an audience I didn't answer. Instead, I opened one of Lauren's social media pages again. This time, I ignored the videos. I looked at the business side: brand partnerships, cooking products, kitchen decor, meal delivery services, vacation sponsorships. Each smiling post carried the words paid partnership somewhere beneath it. Some videos had over 2 million views. Others were sponsored by companies I recognized from television commercials. I wasn't just part of Lauren's content, I was part of her business. The realization settled heavily over me. People weren't simply laughing at me. Someone was making money while they laughed. Around noon, the doorbell rang. I almost didn't answer. It was Noah. He stood on my porch wearing his baseball cap backward, holding a grocery bag. "Mom said you forgot your pound cake." His voice sounded careful, too careful. I invited him inside. He wandered into the kitchen like he had since he was little. I brought it before Mom froze it. He placed the cake gently on the counter. We stood in silence for a moment, then he looked at me. "Grandma, yes." "You didn't answer Mom today." "No." He nodded slowly, as though confirming something to himself. "You saw it." The words were barely audible. I felt my heartbeat quicken. "What did you say?" He looked toward the window before lowering his voice. "You saw the videos?" I didn't respond. His shoulders slumped. "I knew eventually you would." The room suddenly felt much smaller. "You knew?" He nodded. "I found them last year." My coffee cup nearly slipped from my hand. "Last year?" I tried telling Dad. "What did he say?" Noah stared at the floor. "He said it was just entertainment." The sentence landed harder than any insult online. Just entertainment, not humiliation, not betrayal, entertainment. "I told Mom people were being mean." He swallowed. "She said if people talked about you, the algorithm kept recommending her videos." Algorithm. Another word I barely understood. Yet somehow it had become more important than dignity. Noah reached into his backpack. "I wasn't supposed to keep this." He placed a small memory card on the kitchen table. It looked ordinary, tiny, weightless. "What is it?" I copied it from Mom's editing computer. I looked at him carefully. His eyes were red, not from crying. From carrying a secret much too heavy for a 14-year-old boy. "Why?" He finally met my eyes. "Because the videos online aren't the originals." The kitchen fell completely silent. He pushed the memory card toward me. "The real ones," his voice cracked, "show everything she cut out." I stared at that tiny piece of plastic. It suddenly felt heavier than every family photograph hanging in my house. If Noah was telling the truth, then somewhere, hidden inside that memory card, was the family I actually remembered. And the woman Lauren had worked so hard to erase. Part 4, the original footage for nearly a minute. Neither Noah nor I touched the memory card. It sat between us on my old oak kitchen table, no larger than my thumbnail. Funny, isn't it? The heaviest truths in life rarely arrive in large packages. Sometimes they come disguised as something so small you almost overlook them. Noah finally broke the silence. "I copied it 3 months ago." I looked at him. "You've been carrying this around for 3 months?" He nodded without meeting my eyes. I didn't know what to do. I understood that feeling better than he realized. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from knowing the truth while everyone else keeps smiling. I had lived inside that loneliness since George died. Now my grandson had joined me there. I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. "You shouldn't have had to carry this by yourself." His lips tightened. "I thought Dad would stop her, so did I." That answer seemed to hurt him more than anything else. Noah had always believed his father could fix any problem. When he was 6, Matthew rebuilt Noah's treehouse after a storm. When he was 10, Matthew drove through a snowstorm just to make it to his baseball championship. To Noah, his father had always been the man who showed up. Now, for the first time, he was beginning to understand that people can be dependable in every part of life, except the one that matters most. family. I carried my laptop into the kitchen. The memory card slid into the adapter with a soft click. A folder appeared on the screen. It wasn't labeled videos. It wasn't labeled content. Lauren had named it something much colder, raw footage. More than 500 files filled the folder. Dates, times, locations. Nearly 2 years of Sunday dinners, birthdays, Christmas, Thanksgiving. Even George's memorial luncheon. Everything had been cataloged. Everything had been archived, not as memories, as material. I opened the oldest file. There was no background music, no cheerful captions, no dramatic editing, just ordinary life. Lauren adjusted the hidden camera while pretending to arrange flowers. Then she walked back into frame, wearing the exact same warm smile I remembered. "Hi, Evelyn," she said brightly. "I'm so happy you're here." I watched myself walk through the front door carrying homemade apple bread. I looked nervous, almost shy. I remembered that day. It had been the first invitation after months of feeling like an outsider. I wanted everything to go well. The recording continued. Lauren hugged me. She thanked me for the bread. She called me family. Then, before anyone else entered the dining room, she glanced directly toward the hidden camera. She smiled, not at me, at the lens. The smile changed. It became sharper, more calculated, almost professional. She leaned close enough that her voice barely registered. "This one should perform well." The words made my stomach turn. Noah looked away from the screen. I heard her say things like that all the time. "You never told me." I was scared. I squeezed his shoulder gently. "You were a child." He corrected me quietly. "I still am." That sentence settled somewhere deep inside me. He shouldn't have been protecting his grandmother. Children should never have to choose between loyalty and honesty. The next recording began. Dinner had already started. Lauren asked me about the bread recipe. I spent nearly 5 minutes explaining how George loved extra cinnamon and how Noah used to sneak raisins before the dough finished rising. Everyone laughed. Matthew laughed hardest. The room felt warm, comfortable. Then the recording ended. I remembered exactly how that evening felt. One of the happiest family dinners we'd had in years. Curious, I opened the version Lauren had uploaded online. 38 seconds, that was all. Every story about George, gone. Every laugh from Matthew, gone. Every smile from Noah, gone. The only clip she kept was me accidentally dropping my fork. The screen froze on my embarrassed expression. Large white letters appeared. "Guess who always finds a way to make dinner awkward?" Over 300,000 people had watched it. I closed the browser immediately. Not because I couldn't bear seeing myself. Because I couldn't bear seeing George erased. Lauren hadn't simply edited me. She had edited our family, every act of kindness, every shared joke. Every ordinary moment that proved we loved one another. She removed them all. Only conflict remained, only discomfort. Only the version that made strangers stay long enough to watch advertisements. Noah quietly opened another folder. "I think you should see this one." Unlike the others, it contained no dinner footage, only short clips. Most lasted less than 30 seconds. The file names caught my attention. Reaction 12, Reaction 27, Reaction 43. "What are these?" I asked. Noah swallowed. "Mom records reactions." Reactions, when something doesn't happen naturally. He hesitated. "She makes it happen again." I felt a chill crawl across my arms. He clicked the first file. Lauren stood alone in the dining room after everyone had left. She replayed one of the dinner recordings on her tablet. Then she spoke directly into another camera. "No, that won't work." She rewound the footage, paused it on my face. "If I slow this part down." She dragged the editing cursor. "People will think she's glaring." Another pause. She smiled. "I can make that look much worse." The room around me disappeared. I wasn't watching my daughter-in-law anymore. I was watching a director. Someone who understood exactly how to manufacture emotion. How to tell viewers what to believe before they ever had the chance to think for themselves. Noah whispered, She says audiences don't want real life. I stared at the frozen image of my own face on Lauren's editing screen. What do they want? He answered without hesitation, a villain. Outside, thunder rolled across Maple Falls. Rain struck the kitchen windows in heavy waves. For the first time since discovering the live stream, I wasn't crying. I wasn't even angry. Anger burns hot. This felt colder, clearer. I finally understood something George used to tell his history students. A lie repeated often enough doesn't become the truth. He would smile before finishing the sentence. It simply becomes familiar. Lauren hadn't convinced millions of strangers that I was cruel. She had convinced them I was familiar. The difficult mother-in-law, the bitter widow. The old woman, everyone believed they already knew. Then Noah opened one final folder. Unlike the others, it had no date, just 3 words, do not delete. My heartbeat slowed. Have you watched this? He shook his head. No, why not? His face turned pale, because... He looked straight into my eyes. Dad is in it. I slowly moved the cursor toward the folder. Whatever waited inside, I already knew one thing. My family had been keeping more than one secret. Part 5, The Man Who Chose Silence. My hand hovered over the folder for several long seconds. The words do not delete seemed almost alive, pulsing against the white glow of my laptop screen. Beside me, Noah folded his arms tightly across his chest. He wasn't afraid of what we might find. He was afraid of being right. I clicked. Inside were only 9 video files. No dates, no descriptions, just numbered recordings. I opened the first one. The camera angle was familiar. It came from the same hidden lens inside Lauren's floral centerpiece. The dining room was empty except for Lauren and Matthew. Dinner hadn't started yet. Lauren was arranging napkins, while Matthew poured iced tea into 4 glasses. She looked toward the centerpiece. Is it recording? Matthew reached beneath the flowers. A tiny blue light blinked. He smiled. We're live, my breath caught. Not because he knew about the camera, but because he had turned it on. The screen blurred for a moment as tears filled my eyes. For almost 2 years, I had protected my son in my own mind. I had convinced myself Lauren was manipulating him, that he was too busy, too trusting, too distracted to notice. Now I was watching him prepare the stage. Lauren laughed softly. The Mother's Day video passed 1 million views. Matthew nodded without much enthusiasm. That's good. We picked up 2 new sponsors. Another nod, good. She walked over and kissed him on the cheek. See? I told you people relate to difficult mothers-in-law. Matthew didn't answer. He simply looked toward the front window. Almost uneasy, Lauren noticed. You still feel guilty. It doesn't matter. It obviously matters. Matthew rubbed the back of his neck. Sometimes I think we're taking it too far. Lauren sighed dramatically. We're telling stories. We're editing stories. Same thing, no. Matthew's voice remained calm. They're not. Silence settled between them. For one brief moment, hope flickered inside me. Maybe this was where he stopped her. Maybe this was where my son finally remembered who he was. Lauren stepped closer. Matt, he looked at her. If we stop now, we lose everything. She began counting on her fingers. The sponsorships, the mortgage, Noah's college fund, the brand, our employees. She smiled gently. And besides, she shrugged. Your mom doesn't even know. Matthew lowered his eyes. No. Has she ever asked? No. Has she ever complained? He shook his head. Lauren rested both hands against his chest. Then no one's getting hurt. Those words echoed through my kitchen. No one's getting hurt. I thought about the thousands of comments calling me bitter, the grocery store glances, the whispers. The shame I couldn't explain because I didn't even know it existed. No one's getting hurt. Some lies become easier to tell when the victim never hears them. Matthew finally whispered, I just wish she'd stop reading the comments if she ever finds them. Lauren laughed, my sweet husband. She touched his face. Your mom barely knows how to reset her Wi-Fi. The recording ended. I stared at the blank screen. My hands had stopped shaking. Grief does that sometimes. It burns so fiercely that eventually it freezes. Noah quietly reached over and closed the laptop. I'm sorry, I looked at him. What are you apologizing for? My dad, the words came out broken. I kept hoping he didn't know. I wrapped my arms around him. He was almost as tall as Matthew had been at 14, the same dark hair, the same stubborn chin. But there was something in Noah that hadn't survived into adulthood for my son: moral courage. You don't have to carry his choices, I whispered. He nodded against my shoulder. I know, but I still love him. So do I. That was the cruelest part. Love doesn't disappear the moment someone disappoints you. Sometimes it stays. Sometimes it becomes heavier. Sometimes it becomes almost impossible to carry. After Noah left that afternoon, the house felt painfully quiet. I walked through each room slowly. George's reading glasses still rested on the bookshelf. His favorite flannel shirt still hung inside the hallway closet. For years, I'd kept those things exactly where he'd left them. People often asked why. The answer was simple. Some absences deserve witnesses. I stopped in front of the framed photograph from Matthew's high school graduation. George stood proudly beside him, one hand on our son's shoulder, his smile wide enough to light the entire picture. I remembered something George told Matthew that day. Character isn't measured by who's watching. He had laughed before finishing. It's measured by what you do when nobody is. I wondered what George would have said if he'd lived long enough to see this. Then I realized something. Maybe he already had. George noticed things other people missed. He once caught a contractor overcharging us because the numbers didn't feel honest. He could tell when Matthew lied about breaking a window before the boy ever opened his mouth. He always trusted patterns more than excuses. Suddenly, another memory surfaced. About a year before George died, he'd come home from dinner unusually quiet. When I asked what was wrong, he'd simply said, "Fame changes people faster than money." At the time, Lauren's online audience was still small. I hadn't understood. Now I wondered. Had George seen the beginning before any of us did? My thoughts were interrupted by my phone vibrating across the kitchen counter. Lauren, again, this time she didn't call. She sent a message. Miss you already? I'm planning something extra special for next Sunday's dinner. Everyone's excited. I read it twice, then a third time. The words sounded sweet, almost loving. But now I could hear the sentence beneath the sentence. She wasn't inviting Evelyn Carter. She was scheduling the next episode. For the first time in nearly 2 years. I didn't feel like the victim. I felt like the only person in the room who finally knew the script. And once you know the script, you no longer have to perform it. Part 6, I stopped being the audience. The following Sunday arrived wrapped in sunshine. Maple Falls looked exactly the way George used to describe it every May. The town forgets winter overnight, he would say. Like people pretending nothing painful ever happened. As I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, buttoning my pale blue cardigan, I realized I had spent nearly 2 years pretending exactly that. Pretending Lauren's little remarks didn't sting. Pretending Matthew's silence wasn't changing. Pretending every Sunday dinner still belonged to the family I remembered. Today, I wasn't pretending anymore. For the first time since George's funeral, I dressed carefully for a reason that had nothing to do with hope. I was dressing to observe. I picked up my phone before leaving the house. Then, after a moment's hesitation, I tucked it into the inside pocket of my purse with the voice recorder already running. Not because I intended to trap anyone. Because I had finally learned that memory fades, evidence doesn't. The drive to Matthew's house took 20 minutes. Every familiar landmark carried a different meaning now. The elementary school where Matthew learned to ride his bicycle. The diner where George proposed over blueberry pie. The church where Noah had been baptized. Places don't betray you, people do. Lauren opened the front door before I even reached the porch. There she is. She hugged me with the same practiced warmth. I was worried you weren't coming. I almost didn't. For the briefest instant, her smile flickered. Not enough for anyone else to notice, enough for me. Oh, Evelyn, she laughed lightly. You know Sundays aren't Sundays without you. No, I thought quietly. Your Sundays aren't profitable without me. Inside, everything looked picture perfect. Fresh flowers, candles. Country music drifting softly from hidden speakers. A roast already resting on the kitchen island. Matthew carried plates to the dining room. He kissed my cheek. I'm glad you're here, Mom. His eyes lingered on my face a second longer than usual. Almost as though he were searching for something. Guilt, fear. Or perhaps simply reassurance that I still hadn't discovered the truth. Noah caught my eye from across the room. He gave the smallest nod. It wasn't a greeting. It was a question. Are you all right? I answered with a faint smile. I'm still standing. That was enough. While Lauren disappeared into the kitchen, I quietly studied the dining room. Nothing had changed. The same white tablecloth. The same blue ceramic pitcher. The same arrangement of peonies. The same hidden camera. Now that I knew where to look, it seemed almost ridiculous that I'd missed it for so long. The tiny black lens peered through the flowers like an unblinking eye, watching, waiting, judging. Lauren returned carrying mashed potatoes. She set them directly beside the centerpiece. Perfect framing, of course. Everything she did now revealed intention. Even the placement of serving dishes. Dinner began. Conversation floated gently from weather to baseball to Noah's upcoming history exam. Lauren laughed at exactly the right moments. Matthew smiled on cue. Anyone walking through the front door would have sworn we were the happiest family in Ohio. Then Lauren looked toward me. So, Evelyn. Her voice became brighter. I heard you forgot your password again this week. Matthew chuckled politely. Noah didn't. I looked at Lauren calmly. No, oh, I remembered it. For a split second, complete silence settled over the table. Lauren recovered quickly. That's wonderful, she laughed. I swear technology gets all of us eventually. Normally, I would have laughed too, today. I simply buttered my dinner roll. Lauren shifted gears. So what have you been doing all week? I've been watching videos. Again, silence. Matthew finally looked directly at me. What kind of videos? I met his eyes. Family videos. He froze, only for a heartbeat. But after 43 years of being his mother, I knew every expression my son had ever worn. When he was 7, he looked exactly like that, after breaking Mrs. Calloway's kitchen window with a baseball. When he was 15, he looked exactly like that, after lying about denting George's truck. His face always did the same thing. His jaw tightened. His eyes stopped blinking. Lauren reached for her water glass too quickly. I love old home movies, she said cheerfully. So do I. I took a sip of iced tea. I've been surprised by how much editing can change a story. Matthew's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Lauren smiled. A little editing never hurts. I looked directly at her. Sometimes. I paused just long enough to let the words settle. It's the difference between remembering someone and inventing them. The room became painfully still. Even the grandfather clock in the hallway suddenly sounded louder. Tick, tick, tick. Lauren broke the silence first. You've always had such a poetic way of saying things. It was an escape, a graceful one. She was trying to move the conversation away from dangerous ground. Years ago, I would have helped her. I would have rescued everyone from discomfort. Not anymore. Instead, I smiled gently. George used to tell his students that history belongs to whoever keeps the records. Matthew slowly lowered his fork. Noah looked at me with quiet astonishment. Lauren's smile had become noticeably thinner. I wasn't accusing anyone. I wasn't raising my voice. I was simply speaking the truth. And truth has a peculiar way of making guilty people hear accusations that were never spoken aloud. The rest of dinner unfolded awkwardly. Lauren talked more than usual. Matthew talked less. Noah barely spoke at all. Several times I noticed Lauren glancing toward the floral centerpiece, not at the flowers, at the tiny hidden camera, checking the angle. Checking the performance, checking whether her audience was still watching. When dessert arrived, Lauren insisted we all move into the living room. I have something fun planned. My pulse slowed, there it was. The reason for today's invitation. She disappeared upstairs for a moment before returning with a neatly wrapped gift box. This, she announced proudly, is for my followers. She turned the box toward the camera, hidden among another arrangement of flowers on the coffee table. I thought it would be so heartwarming if Evelyn opened it live. Live, of course. Everything meaningful in our family now belonged to strangers first. She handed me the box with both hands. Her smile was flawless. Matthew looked uncertain. Noah quietly leaned forward in his chair. I lifted the lid. Inside, resting on white tissue paper, was George's old pocket watch. The one that had disappeared from my house almost 6 months earlier. I slowly looked up at Lauren. She smiled as though she'd just reunited me with a precious family treasure. Only, I knew something she didn't. George had hidden something inside that watch years before he died. And if Lauren had truly stolen it from my house, she had no idea what she had just placed back into my hands. Part 7. The first crack in her script. For a long moment, I stared at George's pocket watch, resting inside the velvet gift box. Lauren smiled expectantly. The cameras waited. Somewhere beyond those tiny lenses, thousands of strangers were watching to see whether the old woman would cry. I almost did. Not because she had returned the watch. Because she had chosen George's memory as another piece of content. She couldn't understand the difference. To her, it was a touching prop. To me, it was 46 years of marriage condensed into a piece of silver small enough to fit in my hand. Where did you find it? I asked. Lauren answered without hesitation. Oh, Matthew came across it while cleaning the basement. Matthew looked up, then immediately looked away. It happened so quickly that no one else would have noticed. A son can hide a lie from the world. He cannot hide it from his mother. I turned the watch over in my palm. The metal still carried the tiny scratch George made while repairing Mr. Donnelly's fence almost 15 years earlier. No. This hadn't been sitting forgotten in a basement. Someone had taken it from my house. Someone had decided that even my grief belonged in their production. Lauren leaned closer. I thought our viewers would love seeing you reunited with it. Our viewers, not family, not friends, not us. I gently closed the box. I'm not opening George's memory for an audience. The room fell silent. Lauren laughed softly. Oh, Evelyn, that's not what this is. I raised my eyes and looked directly toward the centerpiece, toward the flowers, toward the tiny black lens hiding beneath them. Then I reached forward, very slowly, very calmly. I moved one white peony aside with my fingertips. The camera appeared. No larger than the end of my thumb. No one spoke, not the crew, not Matthew, not even Noah. I looked at Lauren. If this dinner is truly about family, I paused. Turn it off. Lauren's smile remained on her face. Only now it no longer reached her eyes. Evelyn, turn it off. Her fingers tightened around her phone beneath the table. I watched the calculations moving across her face. If she turned the camera off, everyone in the room would wonder why. If she left it running, she had no idea what I might say next. For the first time in 2 years, she wasn't directing the scene anymore. She was reacting to it. Matthew shifted uneasily. Maybe. His voice sounded uncertain. Maybe we don't need to live stream tonight. Lauren turned toward him. The surprise in her expression lasted less than a second, but I saw it. She hadn't expected resistance. Not from him, not here. She forced another smile. It's already live. Noah quietly looked at me. I gave him the smallest nod. Not yet. He understood immediately. He lowered his eyes again without saying a word. Dinner continued. But something fundamental had changed. Lauren spoke less, she laughed less. Every few minutes her eyes drifted toward the hidden camera, as though checking whether it still belonged to her. It didn't, not anymore. Because cameras don't control stories, people do. And for the first time since George died, I wasn't sitting at that table hoping to be accepted. I was sitting there watching a performance begin to collapse under the weight of one simple request: turn it off. Lauren never did. And that single decision told me everything I needed to know. As I drove home beneath the fading Ohio sunset, George's watch rested quietly in my purse. I never opened it. I never searched it for secrets. Because that night, I finally understood something George had spent our entire marriage trying to teach me. People reveal themselves far more clearly than hidden objects ever can. The real evidence wasn't inside an old pocket watch. It was sitting across the dinner table, and for the first time, I had stopped looking away. Part 8, building the original story the morning after Sunday dinner. I didn't cry. That surprised me. For weeks, every new discovery had left me grieving a different version of my family, but grief has a limit. Eventually, it becomes clarity. I made coffee, opened every curtain in the house, then called the only person outside my family who had shown me simple kindness: Abby. She arrived an hour later carrying her laptop and 2 paper cups from Miller's Creek Grill. I wasn't sure how to help, she admitted. You already did, I said. You told me the truth. She smiled sadly. I just wish I'd done it sooner. So did I. Not because it would have spared me embarrassment. Because it would have spared Noah another year of believing adults would eventually do the right thing. Right on time, Noah knocked on the back door. He didn't bring another memory card. He didn't need to. The original files were already safely copied onto my laptop. Instead, he carried a yellow legal pad. I made a list. He handed it to me. Across 3 pages, he'd written every video he could remember Lauren changing: the Thanksgiving clip, Mother's Day, my birthday, George's memorial luncheon, Christmas breakfast. The list kept going. Each title carried a short note beside it. Original, Grandma thanked Mom. Posted, Grandma criticized dinner. Original, Dad laughed. Posted, Dad looked embarrassed. I stared at the pages. When did you make this? He shrugged. Last winter. You've been keeping track all this time? He looked uncomfortable. I thought someday someone would ask. The room fell quiet. Children should never have to prepare evidence against the adults they love. Abby opened her laptop. Let's organize this. For the next 4 hours, the 3 of us stopped behaving like victims. We behaved like historians. No speculation, no revenge, no guesses. Only facts. For every edited clip, we found the original. For every cruel caption, we wrote down what had actually happened. Whenever memory disagreed with the footage won. George used to tell his students, history belongs to whoever keeps the best records. For the first time since he died, I finally understood what he meant. By early afternoon, 12 examples remained. Not 100, not 50, just 12, the strongest 12, enough to show a pattern. Enough to remove every excuse. Abby leaned back in her chair. If you post these online, she hesitated, people will destroy Lauren. I closed the laptop. No. Both Abby and Noah looked at me. I don't want strangers punishing her. What do you want? Abby asked. I want the people who love her. I paused to see her clearly. That was different. The internet loves outrage. Families need truth. Around 3 o'clock, my phone vibrated. Lauren, I let it ring. A voicemail arrived moments later. Evelyn, she said cheerfully. I've been thinking about Sunday. I hope I didn't make you uncomfortable. Her voice sounded warm, practiced. Then came the sentence that settled everything inside me. I'd really love to do something special next weekend. Not for us, for the next episode. I deleted the voicemail without replying. Abby watched me quietly. You're calmer than I expected. I smiled faintly. When you've worked in a library for 40 years, you learn something. What's that? People can rewrite a page. I rested my hand on the closed laptop. But they can't rewrite every copy. Abby laughed softly. I like that. So did George. Late that afternoon, Noah walked with me onto the back porch. The maple trees swayed gently above the fence George never finished repairing. I've been thinking, Noah said. About what? The live stream. I waited. What if Mom deletes everything before anyone sees it? It was the first practical question anyone had asked. Not emotional, not philosophical. Practical. I looked at him. What would Grandpa do? He smiled. He'd make copies. Exactly. I nodded toward the laptop. We're making copies? No, he grinned. I mean more than one. That was the moment I realized something remarkable. George hadn't simply taught history. He had taught Noah how to protect it. By sunset, we had copied the original footage onto 3 separate drives. One stayed with me, one stayed with Noah, the third, I handed to Abby. She frowned. You trust me with this? I trust the woman who chose compassion before convenience. Her eyes filled with tears. I won't lose it, I know. As she drove away, I looked toward my quiet little house. 3 copies, 3 witnesses. 3 people who knew the original story. For 2 years, Lauren had believed she controlled the narrative because she controlled the camera. She was about to learn something every librarian eventually discovers. Owning the loudest version of a story is not the same as owning the truth, and this time, the truth had backups. Part 9. The weight of looking away. Lauren didn't call on Monday or Tuesday. That worried me more than her messages ever had. People who depend on attention rarely become quiet without a reason. On Wednesday morning, I found out why. Abby sent me a screenshot. Lauren had announced a special live stream for Sunday night. The title read, Healing Our Family, a Conversation from the Heart. I stared at the words for a long time. Healing. She had already written the ending before the conversation had even begun. The audience would expect forgiveness, tears, a hug. The difficult mother-in-law finally softening. She wasn't inviting me to dinner. She was inviting me into another script, only this time, I had already read it. Thursday afternoon, someone knocked on my front door. Matthew. He wasn't carrying flowers, he wasn't carrying excuses. He was carrying a cardboard box. I found these in the garage. Inside were old family photographs. George teaching Noah to fish, Christmas mornings, camping trips, school plays. I smiled. I thought these were lost. Matthew swallowed. They weren't. He looked ashamed. Lauren stopped putting them out. I waited. She said pictures with Dad got lower engagement. The words landed harder than I expected. Not because of what Lauren had done. Because Matthew remembered the exact sentence, which meant he'd heard it and done nothing. He sat quietly across from me. Neither of us spoke for almost a full minute. Finally, he whispered, I keep trying to figure out when I became this person. I poured 2 cups of coffee. Not because the moment needed comfort. Because some conversations deserve patience. You didn't become this person overnight. He nodded. I know, He looked toward the family photographs spread across my dining table. I kept thinking none of it was serious. The comments, the editing, the jokes. I told myself everyone understood it was entertainment. I met his eyes. Did you? He didn't answer. That silence was answer enough. After a while, he spoke again. Noah doesn't look at me the same anymore. There it was, not guilt over the internet, not guilt over sponsorships, his son. Children become mirrors long before adults realize they're being watched. You know what hurts most? He asked. What? I taught Noah to tell the truth. He laughed bitterly. Then I spent 2 years rewarding him for pretending. I reached across the table and placed one photograph in front of him. It showed George kneeling beside 7-year-old Matthew, helping him repair a broken birdhouse. On the back, George had written, If it's worth fixing, don't hide the crack. Matthew stared at his father's handwriting. His shoulders dropped. I miss him, so do I. Another long silence. Finally, he asked the question I'd been waiting for. What are you going to do Sunday? I answered honestly. I'm going. He looked frightened. Mom. I've spent 2 years living inside someone else's edit. I folded my hands calmly. I'm ready to tell the original story. Matthew closed his eyes. Lauren won't let you? No, I smiled gently. She won't. He looked confused. Then I continued. which means she'll reveal herself. For the first time that afternoon, he looked directly at me, not as a frightened son, not as a guilty husband, but as someone beginning to understand the difference between protecting peace and protecting deception. He stood to leave. At the front door, he hesitated. If things go badly Sunday, I waited. I'm not sure what I'll do. I nodded. I know. He frowned slightly. You do? Yes, I smiled sadly. Because that's the first honest thing you've said in a very long time. He left carrying the empty cardboard box. The photographs stayed with me. That evening, Noah came over after baseball practice. He noticed them immediately. You found Grandpa's pictures? No, I smiled. Your father did. Noah looked surprised. He brought them back. He did. A slow smile spread across the boy's face. Small, hopeful, careful. Not because his father had changed. Because his father had finally taken one step in the right direction. Later that night, after Noah went home, I placed 3 things on my dining room table. The folder labeled the original story, George's pocket watch. The stack of family photographs Matthew had returned. I looked at them for a long time. Evidence, memory, choice, 3 different things. All pointing toward the same truth. On Sunday, I wasn't walking into Lauren's house to win. I wasn't walking in to humiliate her. I was walking in because families cannot begin healing until someone has the courage to stop protecting the lie. And for the first time since George died, I wasn't waiting for someone else to be brave. I already was. Part 10, the last performance Sunday, arrived bright and impossibly ordinary. The kind of Ohio morning that tricks you into believing difficult things belong to other families. I carried only one purse. Inside were George's pocket watch and one small flash drive labeled the original story. Not because it contained every lie. Because it contained enough truth. When I turned onto Matthew Street, I immediately saw something new. A production van, lighting equipment. Cable cases stacked beside the garage. Lauren hadn't planned a family dinner. She had planned an episode. The front door opened before I reached the porch. Evelyn, Lauren embraced me warmly. Her microphone was already clipped beneath her blouse. Even her hugs were wired now. Inside, 2 camera operators adjusted tripods. A young woman monitored audio levels beside a laptop connected to a streaming console. One producer checked viewer numbers before the broadcast had even begun. So, this wasn't just Lauren anymore, it was a business. Matthew stood near the fireplace. He looked exhausted. When our eyes met, he gave the smallest nod, not confidence, permission. He had made a decision. He just hadn't found the courage to say it aloud yet. Across the room, Noah leaned casually against the staircase railing. Most people would have thought he was texting. I knew better. He was connected to Abby. The 3rd copy of the original story was already waiting on her computer across town. If anything happened inside this house, the truth would survive. George would have smiled at that. Lauren clapped her hands. Everybody ready? The producer counted down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lauren transformed. Hello, beautiful friends. Her voice softened, her posture changed. The performance began. She welcomed hundreds of thousands of viewers before introducing me. My incredible mother-in-law, Evelyn. Applause, not from family, from the crew. The dinner itself lasted barely 20 minutes. Every conversation felt rehearsed. Lauren interrupted people to improve camera angles. Asked Matthew to repeat stories. Moved serving dishes closer to the lights. Asked me to smile toward camera 2. Camera 2, not Matthew, not Noah, not family. The comments streamed across the producer's monitor. Poor Lauren. Evelyn looks grumpy again. She's judging everybody. The audience had already decided who I was. They simply hadn't met me yet. Dessert arrived. Lauren stood. This is the moment I've been waiting for. Of course it was. She took my hand. Evelyn. I know we've had our differences. She turned toward camera 1. But today, I hope we can finally heal. The producer gave her a thumbs up. Viewer numbers climbed. Lauren smiled wider, exactly as planned. I squeezed her hand gently. May I say something first? She hesitated, only briefly, then smiled, of course. She thought she still controlled the room. I looked toward the producer. Would you mind showing a short family video before I speak? The producer looked at Lauren. Lauren frowned. What video? I removed the flash drive from my purse. Just a minute, the producer shrugged. We can roll it through the switcher. Perfect. Exactly what Abby had predicted. He plugged the drive into the streaming computer. Unknown to anyone except Noah, the drive contained no video, only a tiny launcher. The real footage wasn't on the flash drive at all, the moment it connected. Abby, waiting at Miller's Creek Grill, remotely transferred the original story directly into the live broadcast queue. The producer blinked. That's strange. The first clip appeared automatically. George's memorial luncheon. No editing, no music, just silence. Then Lauren cutting away my words of gratitude before replacing them with a sarcastic caption. The producer frowned. I didn't cue this. Lauren's smile disappeared instantly. What is this? Another clip, then another. Thanksgiving, Mother's Day, Christmas. Every original beside every edited version. Side by side, impossible to deny. Lauren lunged toward the laptop. Stop the stream. The producer instinctively blocked her. We're live. She reached for the keyboard. Nothing happened. Abby had already mirrored the broadcast to a secure cloud server. Cutting the laptop would accomplish nothing. The footage was already playing. Lauren turned toward Matthew. Do something? He looked at the screen, then at me, then at Noah. Years of silence rested on his shoulders. Slowly, he stepped away from Lauren. No, only one word. But it carried 46 years of my life. Lauren stared at him. What did you say? I said no. He faced the cameras. I should have stopped this a long time ago. The room froze. Even the crew stopped working. One camera operator quietly lowered his headset. The audio engineer covered her mouth. Nobody had expected the story to stop being content and become real. The comments began changing. Fast, wait, those edits are real. She cut Evelyn's compliments. We've been watching lies. Lauren whispered, turn it off. The producer looked at her, then at the screen. Then quietly removed his headset. No, his voice was calm. People deserve to see how this ends. And for the first time in 2 years, Lauren discovered something every storyteller eventually learns. The moment the truth reaches the audience, it no longer belongs to the person who tried to edit it. Part 11. When the audience finally saw the whole story for nearly 10 seconds, no one in the room moved. Not Lauren, not Matthew. Not the production crew, only the live stream continued. The split screen remained visible. On the left, Lauren's edited version. On the right, what had actually happened. The comments exploded so quickly they became impossible to read. Some apologized. Some refused to believe it. This has to be fake. AI can do anything now. Show the full video. Wait. I watched that episode. She really cut that part out? Then Abby appeared, not inside the house. On the producer's monitor, she joined the live control room remotely. The producer frowned. Who's connected? Abby spoke calmly through her headset. I'm the backup administrator. I have every original file. She clicked once. A folder appeared on screen. Raw footage 487 files, every upload, every dinner, every holiday. Timestamps, original recordings, nothing edited, nothing renamed. The producer slowly looked toward Lauren. Is this yours? Lauren didn't answer. She walked quickly toward the streaming console. Disconnect her. The producer didn't move. I said disconnect her. Still nothing. One of the camera operators quietly lowered his shoulder camera. I can't. Lauren turned. What do you mean you can't? He swallowed. Because. He glanced at the raw footage. It's real. Those 2 words changed the room. Not because they accused Lauren. Because they removed every remaining excuse. Lauren reached for the keyboard herself. Matthew stepped between her and the console, not aggressively. Simply, firmly, no, she stared at him. You are seriously doing this? His voice shook. I should have done it 2 years ago. She laughed bitterly. You'll lose everything, he nodded slowly. I already did. Silence. The internet kept watching, the comments shifted again. Not everyone changed their minds, some still defended Lauren. Some insisted there had to be another explanation, but the certainty was gone, nobody was laughing anymore. The producer quietly switched the livestream to another original clip, Christmas morning. Lauren's upload showed Evelyn criticizing breakfast. The raw footage showed something else entirely. Evelyn thanked Lauren for waking up early. Matthew hugged his mother, George laughed, then Lauren cut away the hug, added dramatic music. Inserted text, "Nothing I do is ever enough." The producer looked physically uncomfortable. "I edited reality television before this," he shook his head. "I've never seen anything like this." Lauren's composure finally cracked, tears filled her eyes, not graceful tears, panicked ones. "You don't understand." She looked desperately toward the cameras. "I never meant for people to hate Evelyn," I answered quietly. "No, you only needed them to." She closed her eyes. The sentence hit harder than shouting ever could. For the first time all afternoon, Lauren stopped performing. She simply stood there, exhausted, cornered by her own edits. Matthew slowly picked up the family photograph Lauren had framed for the livestream, the one with George missing. Without speaking, he carried it to the dining table. Then he placed beside it one of the original photographs he had returned to me 2 days earlier. Same family, same moment, different choices. He looked directly into camera one. "My father always told me," his voice faltered, "that photographs preserve our decisions." He held both pictures up. I spent 2 years choosing the wrong one. No one applauded, no dramatic music played, the silence meant more. Across town, Abby quietly uploaded a public archive containing every original recording mentioned during the broadcast, not to shame Lauren. To preserve the evidence before anyone could erase it. The producer watched the upload finish. Then, without asking Lauren, he pinned the archive link beneath the live stream. Lauren stared at the screen in disbelief. "You can't do that," he answered gently. "I didn't." He looked toward me. "She did." I shook my head. "No." Then I looked at Noah. "He did." Every eye in the room turned toward my grandson. The boy lowered his gaze, embarrassed. "I just made copies," George would have smiled. I walked toward Noah and rested my hand lightly on his shoulder. "My husband spent 40 years teaching history." I looked back at the cameras. He used to tell his students that history isn't protected by the loudest voice. It's protected by the people willing to keep the original. I squeezed Noah's shoulder gently. This young man understood that before any of us adults did. Noah finally looked up, not proudly, simply honestly. "I didn't want people to hate Mom," he swallowed. "I just wanted them to stop hating Grandma." No one spoke. There was nothing left to argue, no edits left to make, no performances left to give. The live stream viewer count continued climbing. Not because people wanted more drama, because for the first time, they weren't watching content. They were witnessing a family choose truth over image, and in that moment, Lauren lost the only thing she had truly been fighting to protect, not her sponsors, not her channel, her control over the story. Part 12, the original version, the internet moved on faster than I expected. Within a week, another scandal replaced ours, another influencer, another apology. Another family unraveling in front of strangers. That surprised me. For 2 years, I had believed the entire world was watching me. The truth was simpler. The world had only been passing through. Real life was the part that stayed. Lauren didn't come to my house the next day or the week after. She disappeared, not dramatically, quietly. Her channel went silent. The sponsorships ended one by one. Some companies released statements, most simply walked away. Matthew told me later that she spent days deleting draft videos she never posted. For the first time in years, there was no audience waiting for her, only herself. Healing began somewhere much less dramatic, on a Thursday evening. Matthew arrived carrying a toolbox, not flowers, not apologies, a toolbox. "The back fence," he said. "I noticed it's leaning." I looked toward the yard. George had started repairing that fence before he became sick. He never finished, neither did I. We worked for nearly 3 hours without talking very much. Sometimes grief doesn't need conversation. It needs someone willing to pick up the other end of the board. When the last panel finally stood straight, Matthew looked at the weathered wood. I kept waiting for one big thing that would make you forgive me. He smiled sadly. I was wrong. I brushed sawdust from my hands. Families aren't repaired by one big moment. I looked at the fence. They're repaired one board at a time. He nodded. That was the first apology I believed, not because of what he said, because of what he built. Noah continued visiting every Saturday. We organized old photographs together, not the edited ones, the originals. One afternoon, he laughed while holding up a faded picture of George covered in mud after trying to rescue our neighbor's dog from a creek. I've never seen Grandpa look this ridiculous. I laughed too, neither had he. We placed the picture inside a new album. Across the front cover, Noah carefully wrote, "The original story, not for the internet for us." 3 months later, Lauren called. She didn't ask for forgiveness, she asked for coffee. I almost said no. Then, I remembered something George used to tell me. People don't earn a second chance by asking. They earn it by becoming someone capable of receiving one. When Lauren arrived, she carried nothing. No gift, no camera, no phone in her hand. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, spiritually. I watched every original video, she said quietly. I'd forgotten what really happened. I believed her. That frightened me more than if she had lied. Because somewhere along the way, she had begun believing her own edits. We talked for nearly 2 hours. Sometimes we cried, sometimes we sat in silence. Sometimes there was nothing to say. When she finally stood to leave, she paused at the front door. I don't expect us to be close again. I nodded. Neither do I, she smiled sadly. But maybe we can stop being strangers. Maybe. That was enough. Not every ending needs certainty. Some only need honesty. The first Sunday after everything changed, there was no family dinner. No cameras, no live stream. No audience waiting for someone to become the villain. Instead, Matthew grilled hamburgers in my backyard. Noah burned the first batch of hot dog buns. We laughed. Not because life had become perfect. Because nobody was performing anymore. As the sun began disappearing behind the maple trees, I sat alone on the porch for a few quiet minutes. George's pocket watch rested in my hand. Its steady ticking blended with the evening crickets. Once I believed that little watch represented the life I'd lost. Now, it reminded me of something else. Time doesn't heal every wound. People do, if they're willing. I slipped the watch back into my pocket and looked toward the yard. Matthew and Noah were arguing over whether the burgers needed more seasoning. Lauren stood beside the picnic table, smiling faintly as she handed Noah another plate. No cameras, no perfect lighting, no audience. Just people trying again. I thought back to the rainy evening, when a young waitress placed her phone in front of me and whispered, "Ma'am, do you know over 80,000 people are watching you right now?" At the time, I believed that was the worst moment of my life. I was wrong. The worst moment wasn't discovering strangers had been watching me. The worst moment was realizing I had started seeing myself through their eyes. That was the real betrayal, not Lauren's edits. My own willingness to believe them. I don't know whether every family can survive the truth. Ours almost didn't, but I know this. For 2 years, my daughter-in-law told millions of people who I was. She gave me a name. She gave me a role. She gave me a reputation. And I almost accepted every one of them. Then one quiet Sunday, I stopped asking strangers to tell me my story. And I remembered something every librarian eventually learns. The most valuable copy is always the original. The internet eventually forgot my name. My family didn't. And for the first time in a very long while, that was enough.